Hey there, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to go back together with the Ford 6R80. This is a 2016 model year unit out of an F-150 4x4. And so this is going to be the same unit that you saw in the teardown inspection video and the valve body video, the one that came in where the intermediate shaft was snapped in half. So if you didn't watch those videos, the backstory is that the truck suffered a catastrophic U-joint failure at the differential. And so it is my belief that that failure resulted in the intermediate shaft failing, though I could be wrong, but I don't have any other competing theory that's, as likely or as probable. So anyway, what we're going to do is kind of give you an overview of the build, talk general build strategy and approaches for going back together with these transmissions, and my commentary there will also apply to the GM counterparts as well as the ZF units. And then from there, we'll get into the subassemblies and then work our way to the main case, fill that up, and then ultimately finish up with bolting the control body complex on and, filter and pan, and that will be it. So let me get you a little closer. We'll cover the parts. I'll talk through my 3 priorities when it comes to reassembling these units, and then we'll get into it. Okay, this is going to be a largely stock rebuild. The truck itself is completely stock, no engine mods, no big tires or anything like that. It's just, as it was from the factory, and the only things that have been done on it are just routine maintenance and repairs. So we're going to go with a BorgWarner friction module and a steel module from Transtar. We are going to reuse the pump body and gears. Normally I don't like to do that, but you can't get the gears independently anymore, at least as far as I know, and the body and the pump cover along with the gears are actually in very serviceable shape, so there's no reason not to go back with them. Alright, most of the upgrades that went into this thing are going to be in the valve body. So we did a sonic zip kit and a central valve body's oversized drop-in valve kit to remediate some of the concerns that we uncovered when going through the valve body, testing it and whatnot. I have a whole separate video on that, so you can check that out. Alright, we are going to replace all the bushings. I've already installed them. I didn't film any of that. Most people don't watch bushing videos. One thing I will say about the bushings in this transmission is that they are somewhat ornery. In other words, don't be surprised if you have to file to fit your bushings over their respective journal surfaces when you install the new ones. And they can be a pain to extract. So be prepared to spend a little bit of time with them, with a hammer and chisels and punches, blind hole pullers, etc. Especially the bushings in the input shaft and the output shaft. And I don't know, they're about maybe 3/4 of an inch in diameter, roughly speaking. They were a bit troublesome, but just know that that's kind of the story there. As far as the mechanical diode, they're going to be installed in all vehicles, or all transmissions rather, produced in 2011 and up. So this is a 2016. It has a mechanical diode in the rear of the case, so we're going to put a new Ford OEM diode just to cover our bases. Is that mandatory? No. You can reuse your diode if it's in good shape. I've always defaulted to replacing one-way clutch assemblies in all transmissions. It's just part of my build strategy, but I would say that it is not mandatory with these. Alright, the intermediate shaft and hub are both being replaced with brand new Ford OEM equivalents. I did offer the customer a billet shaft, just simply because this is a common failure point in these units, and he politely declined that option, and I understand why. I mean, billet shafts are extremely expensive. They're upwards of 4 to 5 times the cost of a factory replacement shaft. So I believe the failure was caused by that U-joint issue, and so provided nothing like that happens again, and he doesn't do anything wild and crazy to the engine or anything like that, the Ford shaft and overdrive hub should be fine. Alright, what else? As far as, all the bolts and small parts, they're going to be all the same, they'll go back in. And then the case itself, again, nothing unusual we're doing there. So let me talk about my 3 priorities for assembly with these units. And when I say these units, I mean both the Ford 6 speeds, the GM 6 speeds, and the ZF units. And those 3 priorities are as follows. First and foremost is clutch clearances. You want to make sure all your clearances are within the factory specified ranges. If you fall outside those ranges, chances are there's going to be drivability symptoms of varying severity. Okay, they are extremely sensitive to clearance, and this being a clutch-to-clutch transmission family, their proper function is predicated on you having all the correct clutches within specified range for their respective clearance. All right, second priority is going to be bearing location and orientation. These transmissions have a lot of Torrington bearings, and some of them are very similar looking to others, but they're not interchangeable in terms of their location, except for the rear sun gear bearings. They're exactly the same. So you want to make sure that you have your bearings both oriented correctly as well as in their respective locations where they need to go, so that you don't have a problem when it comes to setting up your end play. And that leads me to the third priority, which is that end play measurement. For the 2-wheel drive transmissions, you have both rear or output end play and front and or input end play that you have to manage to. For the 4x4 units, you only have front end play. So when it comes to being within your clearances and or getting within your factory specified tolerance ranges for these things, you want to be prepared with extra selectives on the bench, and that's what you see at the base of the clutch module there. We have several additional clutch snap rings for the forward, direct, and intermediate clutch. We also have an additional pressure plate for the low reverse clutch. There's 3 or 4 different plates available. So I have the one that came out of the transmission, as well as an additional one that's something like 20 thousandths thicker. And then you also want to have maybe 2 to 3 different stator selective spacers. So we have the one that came out of the transmission on the red rag there, and then we also have an additional one in the middle of those snap rings and low reverse pressure plate that's 10 thousandths thicker. So front end play is 8 to 15 thousandths of an inch. That's where you want to be. So we're kind of ready in the event we're outside that range with another selective, and if I'm still outside the range or that other selective doesn't work, then I'll just go get another one or have one of these machined. Okay, what else? The TransStar overhaul kit that you see in behind the clutch module, let me go get that real quick, and I want to give you the part number for this because I like the way they set up all of the little O-rings that you're going to be putting on the various apply and balance pistons. They organize them and segregate them by location in each individualized baggies. So that takes a lot of the guesswork out of trying to figure out which O-rings go where, because they're all roughly similar size visually, and it's easy to potentially get mixed up, especially if you're not super well versed with a ton of reps on these transmissions. So get the clutch module out of the way. Okay, so the part number overall is going to be 6380, and then you have another part number here, 710 16887, and this is a Transtech part number, and then here are all the individualized baggies. Now I had to take some stuff out of here for the valve body, but this kit has everything you're going to need for all your consumables inside the transmission. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and stage everything. So I'm going to put all of our small parts out of the overhaul kit where they need to go. We'll break open the steel module, the clutch module, get all the clutch packs stacked up and ready for installation, and then we'll begin the assembly. So I'm going to start with the pump, and then we'll work our way down the bench until there's literally nothing left to assemble prior to installation into the case. Alright, so there's everything that we need to work with. So, alright, let me go ahead and do what I need to do here to prep, and then we'll begin. Alright, so I'm going to start with the pump. Like I said, I always like to replace these kind of gears on anytime you have a crescent style pump body. It's just something I like to do, especially if you have flats for your engagement with the torque converter. They tend to get worn out. These are actually okay, and these gears are in good shape. So unfortunately, I'm not able to source individual gears. My hard part supplier can't get them. Ford, I guess, doesn't make them anymore. So if you're in this situation and your gears are no good, you may have to simply purchase an entire pump body assembly, and they run anywhere from $200 to $300 depending on, you know, what it is, where you're getting it, and who's selling it. But these gears are in good shape. You'll notice there's basically no real discernible wear on the driven gear here on the outer diameter. The teeth are in good shape. There's no structural flaws or faults with either of these gears. The crescent here on the pump body is also in very good shape. Again, no discernible signs of wear or anything that would concern me. The working surface has no scoring. There's visual wear. You could see it, but again, I can't feel anything when I'm dragging my fingernail across, and I did this without gloves on just to, you know, just to let you know. But overall, I'm okay with reusing these gears. There's no line pressure issues that would be attributed to the pump itself. The pump is in good shape. So as far as the bushing, I'm using a Durabond pump body bushing. Okay, this is the part number. It's going to be JT-80-1T. I like these bushings. They're Teflon coated, and they're, you know, they make for a real nice little upgrade over the factory bushing. Sonex makes a bushing kit as well for these transmissions, and it's very expensive, a couple $100, and you'll go through the same rigmarole with the Sonex bushings as you would with the factory replacement bushing set, in terms of having to file to fit or sand or, you know, clearance bushings in certain spots. Alright, here's our seal. So one thing I like to do is make sure that my clearance is where it needs to be. So I'll just put a straight edge, and we'll kind of work our gears. We'll attempt to work our gears. Alright, so it's not moving the straight edge, and I have a 1 thou feeler gauge. So I'll attempt to fit that 1 thou feeler gauge underneath at various locations. And I can't do it without binding up the gauge or moving the straight edge. Alright, this tool is OTC 307-554/1. Alright, it's one of two tools just like this. These are basically gauge bars, and this bottom one here you're going to use when you go to measure your low reverse clutch pack clearance. So we'll go through that whole process when we get to that point, when we're getting ready to install the low reverse clutch pack into the case. There's a whole procedure we have to follow. But as far as the pump is concerned, all we're going to do is install our seal and then replace our O-ring. We'll mate it to the stator support. We'll install the new sealing rings in place of the old ones, and that's basically it. I mean, pump assembly is very straightforward in these units. One thing I'll make mention of is the stator support is a two-piece assembly. Okay, you have this piece, and then you have this piece down here with the O-ring groove. Alright, here are the bolts that hold the two pieces together. You do not have to separate these two halves during assembly. Okay, there's no reason to take this stator assembly apart unless you're replacing one of these two halves or the stator itself for some reason. So just bear that in mind when you see these 5 bolts here. Okay, do not take them out, just leave them. Alright, I'm going to go install the seal. We'll lube everything up, and then we'll go through the assembly process. Okay, seal installed. Here's a closer look at the bushing. Alright, to get the old bushing out, what I did was take a very narrow conical drift punch and just kind of start on this side and basically force the bushing to bow outward by just hammering straight down on it. So you create kind of a divot here, and then you just hammer straight down with your punch until the bushing just simply bows outward, because it can't go in any further due to the ledge here, you know, where it rests. And then once you have it bowed outward a little bit, you just get in behind it and collapse it inward, and that's basically it. So let me go ahead and put a new O-ring on it. Alright, and then just lube your pocket up. You want to be generous with the assembly lube. You don't want any like dry startups or anything like that. And then just make note of the orientation. You have a dot here on both the drive and the driven gear to tell you which way is up. Just double check. You don't want the gears coming into contact with your straight edge. You want to make sure they spin nice and freely before you begin the process of mating the pump body to the stator support assembly. Alright, we'll put our new stator O-ring on later. So what you want to do is look for your 3 bolt hole locations that are at their widest separation. Alright, this pump can only mate one way to the stator support. So the pattern is asymmetric, so you don't have to worry about inadvertently putting it on the wrong way. I mean, you can only put it on one way. So once you have these lined up, then what you're going to do is put on 2 stator to body bolts. Just thread them in part way, and then we'll put a whole boatload of assembly lube here on the O-ring as well as the seating pocket on the stator support. And then from there, you're just going to ease the stator over the body until you have perfect alignment with all your bolt holes. And that's basically it. And then you thread the rest of them in, 133 inch-pounds of torque all the way around, and you just go crossways with it. And then for the stator support itself, you just want to make sure that you have no scoring of any kind, anything that you can feel with a fingernail. I mean, I already checked this, but you have wear patterns that are going to be, you know, visually evident, but you're not going to have scoring or anything else that would otherwise concern you. If you do, then again, you got to replace the assembly. I mean, it's as simple as that. All right, I'm gonna shift the camera over a little bit because tripod's kind of in my way, and then we'll go ahead and put this pump together. Alright, so again, look for the 3 widely spaced holes here. That's where you want to focus your alignment. And then look for the same 3 holes on the stator support. You could put your 2 alignment bolts wherever. I just go right in the middle, the 9 and the 3 position relative to these 3 bolt hole locations here. And you can put more than 2. It doesn't really matter. Main thing is you want to make sure that all these bolts thread in nice and easy. There shouldn't be any kind of, you know, resistance or binding or whatever. Alright, just make sure you're fully seated. You don't want to use the bolts themselves to fully marry the 2. I mean, that could potentially lead to issues, but it usually doesn't. It's just a general best practice not to rely on your bolts. Alright, I'm going to actually mark my locations just because there's quite a lot of bolts. See if this one was actually the one I tightened. It wasn't. That was this one. Alright, so all the bolts are tightened, torqued. So now the last thing we need to do before replacing the pump O-ring, which I'm not going to do right now, is test this thing on the converter. So we have the converter sitting there on the other bench, and so I'm going to seat it, make sure it spins nice and free, that there's no binding or anything else unusual, and then we'll move on to the forward drum. There we go. Okay. So this spins real nice. No issues whatsoever. Alright, so out with the old, and then, like I said, I'm going to leave this off because I prefer to check my front end plate without any of the rings or whatever seals installed. So we'll put that on the other bench for safety. Alright, so last but not least, we need to install our new ceiling rings. So we have a lower and an upper ceiling ring. They are not the same. One's slightly smaller in diameter than the other. So the lower ceiling ring is going to be the larger diameter of the two, and then the other one, of course, is the rear ceiling ring. I mean, I should say front and rear. That would be the more accurate way of describing these two. So the front ceiling ring is going to be your large one, and the rear is going to be the small one. Okay, very easy. They're the interlock variety. Takes 2 seconds to install them. They're not fussy or problematic. Pretty easy deal. Alright, let's move to the forward drum, and we'll get that built up, and then that whole front assembly consisting of the forward clutch, the overdrive clutch, front planetary gear set, 456 hub, and all that encompasses that will be what we do now. Okay, so first things we want to do is install our apply and balance piston. So the Belleville plate goes with the teeth or tangs, tongues, whatever you want to call them, facing up, and then you have your balance piston, and then over top, securing all that in, will be your snap ring. So you got your O-ring for your balance piston, and then your apply piston is going to have 2 O-rings. Alright, and as you can see, they're all different sizes, so it'll be difficult to mix them up given that they're individually packaged in these kits. So all these O-rings are largely the same other than their physical size. Very easy to work with, fairly straightforward deal. Just take them out of the package and put them on, and then smear them with a whole bunch of assembly lube. Okay, they fit as they should. All good. Alright, lube up your sealing surfaces in the drum. Again, be generous with the assembly lube. Don't want any issues on put back. Just carefully work it in, and that's basically it. And then go ahead and lube up the inner diameter of the apply piston itself. And then for your balance piston, same deal. Alright, now that we've lubed up our balance piston's O-ring, there's a vital step we have to take before we install the balance piston, the Belleville plate, and the snap ring on the press. And that is, we need to get our alignment together so that our cutouts here on the piston for the splined cutouts on the planet line up, and the engagement cutouts
on the inboard side or inner diameter of the planet on the inboard facing side line up with the engagement tabs on the drum. Now upon disassembly, what the book has you do is make some sort of indexing marks on the balance piston and the planet prior to removing it from the drum. Now I didn't do that. I guess either I spaced it or just wasn't thinking about it, but that's what you're supposed to do. And what I would recommend you do is just take a center punch and make indexing marks like so. They tell you to use a marker, but the marker is going to get washed off. I mean, within probably as little as 30 seconds, that mark's going to disappear. So what I did is I made a mark here on the Ford Motor Company logo. All right, so that tells me where I want to orient my planet as well as my balance piston so that they mesh and so that the engagement lugs here line up with these. So I also made a mark here on this lug on the drum. So now what I'm going to do is just mesh my planet with my balance piston, and then I'm going to carefully position this so that the two marks line up so that I can confirm it will drop right in over those cutouts and everything will mesh. Alright? So, just like this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a third mark on the balance piston itself, doing the best I can to line it up with these two marks here. And again, we don't want to engage the tabs with the snap ring on the underside of the planet, then we have to pull it back out. I don't know if you can see that, there might be some glare, so I apologize, but those are the two marks that we're going to use. So get our Belleville plate, position it, and then make sure that we spline the balance piston on so that we are lined up with our marks. And we can check it again real quick to make sure that everything will line up once we go to install the planet. Alright, let's go to the press. We'll install the snap ring and then we'll finish up with the gear set. Then we'll go ahead and install our clutch pack and take up clearance. Alright, go ahead and compress everything down until you can fully expose the snap ring groove. Then use your internal external snap ring pliers to install the snap ring. It's just, as simple as that. Maybe not quite as simple as that. Alright. Just check it all the way around. I got caught with the gloves, so it's one of the hazards of wearing gloves. Alright, go ahead and release the press tension. Okay, this tool is Kentmore DT47867. It's meant for GM transmissions, but can be used. And that's what I use on all of these Ford and ZF style units. So it's very effective. Alright, let's go back to the bench. Alright, so now a moment of truth. So we have our indexing marks. And then we have the indexing mark on the planet. So for sun gear, orientation is going to be like this. This is going to be the front side of the sun gear. It's going to face down into the drum. And then your thrust bearing is going to have the outer race facing the sun gear with the side that rotates facing you. So the selective pump washer that's used to set and adjust your front end plate is going to thrust against the front face of the sun gear here. You don't need to install that now, it's just more of an FYI. Alright, so position your sun gear. And then we have the marks here and here. Just want to line those up with the mark here. And you see, I mean, the paint's already kind of coming off. Or I should say the marker, not the paint. This is not a paint pen, it's just a marker. Alright, there we go. That's what I should have done initially. I apologize. I made that a little bit more confusing than it was. But anyway, as you can see, we have our mark here, and then our mark here on the edge of the basket. So anyway, this is in. So now the next step is to bring the pump over. And you can put your little selective. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put air into this port right here. That's our forward clutch feed, and we're going to set up a dial indicator after we put the clutch pack in, and we're going to take a clearance measurement. So get it as square as you can and make sure everything mates, meshes, and splines as it needs to. And that's kind of how you want it. Alright, so let's go over the clutch pack. So we started out with 144 thousandths thick clutch snap ring. So we have our cushion plate, which is 34 thousandths thick. Then we're going to have 6 flat steel plates. All of these are 117 thousandths thick, and 5 friction discs, all of which are 61 thousandths thick. So there are selective snap rings available. All of these snap rings are the same for the 3 clutches of this dimension in this transmission. So this is the forward clutch or A clutch. Then you're going to have your B clutch, which is your direct clutch, and then your C clutch, which is your intermediate clutch. Okay, they all take the same snap ring. The overdrive clutch, which is your E clutch, takes a much smaller snap ring, obviously. So our specification range for clutch clearance is 28 to 43 thousandths. So we want to be ideally, like what I'd like to shoot for, is a clearance between 34 and 38 thousandths. I know that's kind of a tight window, but that's like my ideal nirvana range for this clutch. And that's generally true of all of these. I like to be right in the middle. Sometimes it's not always possible, but as long as you're within the factory specified limit, you're okay. The reason I like to be in the middle is so that in the event that there's any little difference between the clearance is measured on the bench dry and the actual clearance when this thing starts working, you know, maybe it opens up by 3 thou or 2 thou or whatever, I still have plenty of freedom in there. It doesn't matter. If I'm right on the edge, then, you know, it's possible that that difference could be material, because we're only measuring it on the bench. And even if you soak your frictions, which I don't do, but even if you soak your frictions, you're still going to have anywhere from 1 to 2 thou difference as measured. And I know that by, you know, taking these things out on the instances where transmissions would have to come back to me for whatever reason. I measure the clutch clearance, and I specifically do that to gather that data. Alright, so 144 thou snap ring, and these ends are sharp, so just be careful. You don't get your finger caught in there. So I already put some dots where I want to measure this clutch. I don't like to measure it here, and I mean I can measure it back here too, but I don't like to measure it where the snap ring ends are. I like to measure it here and here. That's, in my humble opinion, gives me the most consistent, accurate reading. For the 6Ls, General Motors Kent Moore, which is really OTC, but you know, Kent Moore is the brand name of the tools. They have these discs that you place into the drums, and you put the indicator on these discs, and these things are very expensive. It's a whole set. There's one for each clutch pack. Whether you need them or not is highly debatable. I don't have them. I just do what I'm doing here, and I just make sure that I measure at least 2 spots on the opposite side. That's all you really need to do, in my opinion. So let's rotate. So right here is going to be forward feed. You do not need a ton of air pressure for this. I wouldn't recommend more than about 50 psi. This drum will want to literally jump right off of the pump if you put like 100 psi to it full bore. Alright, so what you have to do is you kind of want to hold the basket, and when you're holding the basket, the indicator will move on you a little bit. So let's see what we have with the 1/44 thou snap ring. Okay, it's roughly resetting to 0. So again, I'm going to put tension, reset. I'm at 1 thou, so I'll just keep that in mind. One thou. Let's call that 46 to 47 thousandths. So this came in with a lot of clearance. The pre-existing steels, as I measured them, were all 115 to 116 thousandths thick. So this transmission has 152,000 miles on it. So that tells me that the steels lost between 1 and 2 thousandths in terms of their thickness during that time. Okay, these steels, every one of them, are 117 thousandths thick. So if you're going to reuse the steels, just keep that in mind. More than likely, you're going to have too much clearance than too little. Too little clearance is actually a more desirable problem to have, especially if your snap ring is on the thicker end of the range of available thicknesses for a given clutch pack. If you're too much clearance and you have like the thickest snap ring available, then either something's way wrong or it's just, you know, really bad luck. So I have a 153 thou snap ring. I want to stick that in there and see what the difference is. So that frees up this snap ring to be used in one of the other 2 clutches of this dimension in the event I need to. Alright, 153 thou, or maybe it's 154. Looks like it's actually 154. So again, be careful. Snap rings are very sharp. Alright, I know I didn't measure on both sides of that other one. I already knew it was not gonna, you know, it was gonna be a little on the high side, so I cheated a little bit there, I guess. Alright, let's see what we got with the 153. So again, we're gonna put some kind of clamping force, make sure that the drum stays where it needs to stay, and then put air. Alright, it's now returning to 0. So 4 thou is our new 0. Alright, so 4 thou is our new 0 and was going to 39 or 40, then that tells me I'm at 34, 35 thousandths, or I should say 35 or 36 thousandths. No one will ever accuse me of being good at math. No one. Alright, let's see what we got on the other side. Alright, we're at 2 thousandths. One thou. Okay, 33, 34 thou. Chop that up in the middle, you're at 34 to 35, which is my ideal target range. So I'm happy with this. All right, now we're going to go ahead and move on to the overdrive clutch. So the overdrive clutch, or E-clutch in ZF parlance, is going to be contained within the backside of the overdrive drum, the basket here, which also serves to house the input shaft. So this is all one assembly. You have your bushing here, which this bushing I didn't even bother replacing. Like I said in the intro, these bushings are extremely onerous to deal with. So you have your overdrive drum / input shaft, and then you're going to have your intermediate shaft and overdrive clutch hub. You're going to have your forward clutch hub, and all of that is held in place via the direct clutch hub and the associated specialized snap ring. So I'm not going to put this whole set together like I know I said that I would in the intro, or a little while ago, but it occurred to me that I want to get in touch with the shop on Monday, today's Saturday, and I want to see if they'd be willing to talk to the customer, the owner of the vehicle, to explore putting in a Raybestos high-performance clutch module in this overdrive section. So the factory clutch consists of 6 flat steels and 6 frictions. You have your backing plate and of course your selective snap ring. Now this clutch is very vulnerable. Okay, I mean it's okay as it is, but it's vulnerable at the same time, along with the direct clutch. I mean those 2 clutches typically burn. The rest of them, you don't see too many problems with. But the 456, at least in this transmission, had some really weird, I guess kind of physical defects when I took it apart and looked at it. It was delaminating, so it was a little odd. Anyway, the point is that the extra clutch module, or the performance clutch module rather, would be a nice upgrade to pair with some of the hydraulic stuff we've done, with the Sonic Zip Kit and the central valve bodies, oversized drop-in valves to address areas of weakness. All right, now with respect to the shaft, as you know, the shaft was snapped in half, and so these shafts are also a weak point in these transmissions. If you're doing anything performance oriented at all, especially if you have either a Mustang or a Ford Raptor, you're going to want to put a billet intermediate shaft into the transmission, and if and when you overhaul it. When that shaft snaps, you lose 4, 5, and 6. So 4th gear, 5th gear, 6th gear goes away. It's neutral, or it'll downshift mechanically to 3rd, and that's it. You'll have basically a 3-speed transmission. So twisting splines, shafts snapping in half are all very common problems with that stock part. So we did propose to the customer to spring for a billet shaft. He politely declined, and I understand why. I mean, they're not cheap. $700-800 is what you're paying for a good one, and the shaft in this transmission snapped, I believe, because the U-joints in the pinion side of the drive shaft catastrophically failed. But if it snaps again, he's going to need to purchase a billet shaft, because that means that he's doing things that are kind of beyond the scope of a purely stock application, or these shafts are just simply that weak because his vehicle otherwise is completely stock. Alright, let's go ahead and set up. So I'm just going to leave this literally on here like that, and we'll adjust the camera, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my pump support tool underneath, and that should allow us to sit the whole overdrive drum and input shaft into place. Ooh, sorry about that. Alright, last thing I'm going to do is replace these ceiling rings, otherwise these are the old ones, so. Alright, this gives me a little bit of a stable platform to work with. Alright, so here's your overdrive apply piston. You have your 2 seals that are inboard and outboard. Then, of course, your Belleville. And then your balance piston has 1 seal. So O-ring seal. So here's the overdrive clutch replacement O-rings. Goes out of the bag. I know you can't see them from where you are. So here's the balance piston. And these two O-rings, the larger two that go into this pack, are very similar in size. So again, this is a good example where you'd want to hang on to your old O-ring seal, even with the segregated packs, you know, of different O-rings. You still want to make sure that you're able to clearly match old with new. You just test the fitment. Looks good all the way around. And then you have your inboard and your perimeter O-ring. So this one could be kind of a, you know, not necessarily tricky, but just a little ornery. It won't want to cooperate. So you got to bend and contort it in there, make sure that it's installed all the way around, and it'll want to fight you a little, especially given I'm doing this in an awkward kind of position. And there it goes. All right, let me pull that middle one out. Now on teardown, all these O-rings are in perfect shape. Clutch apply was good. I always do a case air check whenever one of these comes in, just for diagnostic purposes. Want to see if, you know, one of these O-rings and, you know, whatever clutch that was reported to be problematic, or, you know, where drivability symptoms were present, just to see if we have a either insufficient or failure to apply condition that would explain it. Most of the time, it's actually not the case. Most of the time, it's just simply clutches wear out or they burn up for other reasons. Valve body wear, pressure regulator valve wear, things of that nature are a lot of times, you know, what ultimately will happen. And so that's just the way it is. Alright, so you're going to have to get your brush such that lube goes onto the outer diameter of the basket, or of the sealing surface rather. So right there. And then just lube up your journal real good. So this is the back side of the piston, this is the front side, or the side that faces you. And it just goes right in. That's basically it. Alright, now lube up the inner diameter of the applied piston so that it can receive the balance piston, and then do likewise for the O-ring on the balance piston. Next, you have your Belleville plate. So you notice the tabs here on the applied piston. They sit right in those tabs. You lift this up. It just sits in there just like that. And you're going to sit your balance piston right on top, just square it up. Then your snap ring, and then it's off to the press so that we can install the snap ring. Alright, it's chucked up in the press. I'll specify what tool this is in a second. But here's the snap ring, and you're going to have to come with some authority with this thing because it is rather tough, and if you don't show it who's boss, it'll fight you tooth and nail along the way. Okay, so you want to make sure that your ends are engaged by all 4 locking tabs. So your 2 ends are here in the cutout, and then the locking bosses engage the rest of the snap ring so that it doesn't work free. All right, this particular tool, let me zoom out a little bit, is an OTC tool just like all the others. Tool number is going to be 307-209. Okay, it's for ZFs and Fords and GM Overdrive /E/456 clutch return spring or Belleville plate snap rings. And it makes quick work of dealing with this. All right, let's go back to the bench. All right, so now what we're gonna do is go ahead and install the clutch pack and then take a clearance measurement. So, as I was saying earlier, that bearing goes there. As I was saying earlier, I'm going to see if the customer, or the owner of the vehicle rather, will be open to doing a high performance clutch module in this overdrive section. Okay, so these are the OEM frictions of Ford, Borg Warner, and they're fine. You know, it's not like they're going to create problems or whatever. The unusual failure of this particular clutch pack notwithstanding, but, and I should have proposed this to them or to him indirectly through my shop customer last week, but I didn't think about it. A lot going on last week, so I know it's a poor excuse, but just kind of what happened. Alright, so the snap ring portion here is 115 thousandths thick, and then we have a 75 thousandths thick snap ring. So 19 to 35 thousandths is what we want to manage to here. Like I said, my preference on this pack is to be between 24 and 30 thousandths. So that's like my ideal target range. All right, let me set up the indicator, then we'll kind of go about it. Taking a measurement. All right, so our overdrive feed is going to be here. And what we want to see is something between 19 and 35 thousandths. Like I said, 24 to 30 thou is where I'd like to be ideally, but I just don't want to be on the fringes. So let's go ahead and see what we got. We got 23 thou and 23 thousandths. 23 thousandths is fine. I'm going to rotate it so that we can, measure the same clearance, 180 out. So we'll do here, and then we'll do here. But assuming our average is in that neighborhood, I'm fine with that. All right. So it's exactly 23 both sides. So again, I'm fine. All right, so I'm not gonna complete the assembly on this just yet right now, simply because I want to see if the owner of the vehicle is open to upgrading this pack to that Raybestos GPZ 9 clutch stack. I want to say it's about $225 out the door. And it would be a good deal stronger, make this clutch a lot more resilient to the usual stresses it sees overall. If he doesn't want to do it, that's fine too, and not the end of the world, but it would be a good upgrade for an otherwise stock vehicle. All right, so the last thing we need to do with this drum is the input shaft sealing rings. We need to cut these old ones off and we need to reinstall new ones. So that will require a special tool if you're working with a 2015 and up model year unit. So it's actually a 3-piece set. The pieces I'm going to use are OTC 307-716/1. Okay, this is the installation tool. Just slides over just like this. And then you have your adjustment screw so that you can change the height relative to each sealing ring groove. And then you have OTC 307-716/3. This is what will size the sealing rings once they've been installed. So we'll stick assembly lube in there, and then I'll coat this whole deal with assembly lube as well. Okay, this just makes installation a little bit easier and puts less stress on the sealing rings. So there's 3 of them, the 6R60s and I believe the 75s. I haven't done a 75, but I believe the 75s have 2 sealing rings on the turbine shaft. Input shaft, turbine shaft, those terms are interchangeable. Okay, and you'll have to forgive me, I do not know if the 29 to 2014 scarf cut rings are able to be installed. I just simply don't know. So I just want to check, make sure that each of these sealing rings has no issues with binding up in the groove. Alright, so we'll go ahead and you want to do these one at a time. So you install one sealing ring and then you size it, you install the next, and so forth. Alright, now if you don't have this tool and you are working with a 2015 and up unit, you have a couple of options. First option is to actually test the old sealing rings, and if you're just on a budget, or you're in a pinch, or whatever the case may be, maybe you just don't have access to new sealing rings. If you saw the TorquePak, TorquePaks being worked forward and overdrive, you see that they had no problem with apply. And on this assembly, if your clutches look like the ones that came out of here, not the overdrive but the forward specifically, then you can probably let the sealing rings go in terms of just reuse them. But if you're overhauling the unit like I am, and you're doing it occupationally, then that's not a recommended course of action. But for DIYers, sometimes you just don't have a choice. Alright, your second option is to use improvisational methods. So what you want to do is get yourself a hose clamp and then a sheet of rubber. Let me see if I can, let me move this out of the way. I think I have it in here somewhere. So you have something like this. This is a strip of rubber. You can buy these as sheets off Amazon for $6, and then it's just a regular radiator hose clamp. And whatever hose clamp is appropriate for the size of the sealing ring you're working on. You just want to make sure that there is no exposure to the sealing ring on the locking mechanism here, okay? Because that's a great way to cut the ring. So as long as you keep that in mind and you just be real careful, you can use that in combination with whatever part that mates with the mates with the shaft or wherever the sealing rings are going, to resize them to the appropriate size. And that's it. So this tool set is stupidly expensive. I mean, it is stupidly expensive for what it is. All right, you're paying $500 for this friggin' set. So my advice to you would be to simply just take a little bit more time, be a little bit more careful and deliberate, and use either this method, or if the ceiling rings are in excellent shape, reuse them if you're a DIYer. If you're a shop, then obviously you're going to incur the capital expenditure on tooling, because the tools will pay for themselves in very short order. Alright, third and final ceiling ring. Hey, you'll notice I'll try to size it a little bit with my hand to prep it for the resizing tool. And that'll just get it started to the extent possible, and then I'll slide this over. In fact, let me re-lubricate it. And that second ceiling ring was a little tough because all the lube was consumed by the first one, so. Okay, we got the customer's approval to go ahead with the overdrive clutch upgrade. So what we have here is the Raybestos torque kit, and what it consists of is 9 friction plates, and you have 8 thin steel plates and 2 thick steels to help you dial in your clearance, along with a backing plate. So the original backing plate that came from the factory for the overdrive clutch will be discarded, and it'll be replaced by the new backing plate that comes here in the kit. So let's go ahead and open it up, and we'll kind of show you everything inside, and then I will cover what I have going on over here, which is basically about 90% of the transmission, pretty much everything other than the rear gear set and low reverse clutch pack, so that you understand why I have everything stacked up like this. So I strongly recommend anyone that's going through one of these transmissions, whether it be the Ford variant, the ZF6 itself, or the GM 6Ls, to consider an upgraded overdrive clutch pack. So for GM it would be the 456 clutch, for the ZF it would be the E clutch. But like I said, that's just simply nomenclature. They're all the same otherwise. Alright, so let's pull the instructions out and have a look at them. If I can get them open, that is. Alright, so it's more or less common sense. The main takeaway with these is you want between 19 and 35 thousandths clearance in this clutch pack when all is said and done. So like I said, they give you thin steels, and then they also give you some thicker selectives to go ahead and dial in that clearance. Alright, so I gotta clean these off. I mean, they got like packing grease on them. But here are your main steels. Okay, so let's take a look and see how thick they are. So this one's 70 thou. See which one of these is visually different. $70 thousandths, 70 thou. So here you have a 63 thousandths of an inch thick steel plate.
And here is what appears to be a 63 or 64 thou thick plate. And that is how the majority of them are. They're all 63, 64 thousandths of an inch thick. And all I'm doing is just checking them all just to make sure. Alright, so 70 and 64. And then here's our backing plate. It looks like it's going to be 116 thousandths of an inch thick. And then all of our clutch plates are the same as far as their thickness. So they appear to be 63 or 64 thousandths of an inch thick. Alright, so let me real quick talk about this whole stack up here. Basically, you have all of the applied elements other than the low reverse clutch pack. So here's a mechanical diode. I mean, this is how everything goes in the case. So your mechanical diode is going to be the rearward-most element here, and then you would have your planetary carrier with your two sun gears, and then this would spline into the rear of the planet by the base plate, just the rearward-most splines, and of course you'd have your output shaft / ring gear basket, and then in between you'd have your low reverse clutch pack, which would more or less rest or nest into the back of the case. So as far as air checks are concerned, all right, you're going to have your intermediate, your direct, and then these are your two reverse locations, D1 and D2. All right, on these later models, 2011 and up, you're only going to have one active port. The other one's just going to look, well, like you see it here. So for your overdrive and your forward clutch, you're going to have forward here and overdrive here. That's where you're going to do your air checks. So you can check all your applied elements other than the low reverse, with the components stacked up like this. And the only reason I say don't check low reverse, don't put any air here, is because there's nothing stopping the piston from traveling potentially all the way out. So you don't want to do that. So that's the only reason why I stacked them up, just to kind of show you visually where all the air check locations are once you have all of the components arranged, and you'll have them arranged in the case once you build the case, and you'll see that shortly. Alright, let me clean off all the cosmoline and packing grease, and then we'll go ahead and unravel this a little bit, expose the overdrive drum, and we'll start to stack it up, get our clearance, do our air checks, and basically have this portion of the build completed. Alright, we have all the components that we need to go ahead and stack up the clutch. So here are our frictions. We have all 9 of them. These are our 63,000 steels, our 72 thousandths of an inch thick steels, and our backing plate is 118 thousandths thick. We also have steels from the factory spec clutch pack, which are 116 or 117 thousandths thick. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a baseline. What they have you do is install one thick steel at the bottom of the clutch pack, which is, if you have differing thicknesses of steels on any clutch, you want to have the thicker steels closest to either the bottom of the clutch or where the apply piston is. And that's because there's going to be a little bit more heat generated in that location versus at the top of the basket or at the top of the clutch pack. So 72, then our frictions. And all you're going to do is alternate until you run out of frictions and steels. Alright, so we want to manage to between 19 and 35 thousandths of an inch. So recall a little bit while ago, we had perfect clearance in the factory stack up, so we want to duplicate that feat with this one. So I like to be in the middle, like I said. So for this clutch pack, it'd be somewhere like 23, 24 thou on the low end, 30 thou on the high end.
Alright, so I could already tell that we're going to be a little bit on the high side. As you can see, we have way too much clearance in that pack. That's a lot more than 35,000. It looks like it's probably in the neighborhood of 55 to 60,000. So we need to make adjustments. So we're only going to pick up 6/1000 of an inch if we add the 72 thousandths thick steel plate, the second one that's available to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to install a factory spec plate and a 72 thou plate and see what that gives us. So we'll just take the bottom steel and that will go in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap out a 63 thousand steel from the top, and then that will give us the ability to stack this clutch pack up to give us minimal clearance, and that's what we want. Alright, so we'll go 72 thou. We still have another 72 thousandths of an inch thick plate on the bench in the event we need it. Alright, so we are about 20-25% above the snap ring groove, or into the snap ring groove I should say, and that looks about right. So I think we're in a position now to take a measurement. So let me go ahead and set up the dial indicator, put it on its little pedestal, and then we'll go ahead and put air into the clutch and take a reading to see exactly where we are at and relative to where we need to be. So we do have our 72 thou thick steel, the second one that's available to us in the event we are either close to or even above 35 thou. But I'm looking at this pack. This looks like it's about 30 to 35 thousandths of an inch visually. So I think we're in good position. So let's see what we have once we set up the indicator. All right, we're all set. Going to use 75 psi air. You want at bare minimum 50, but between 50 and 75 is good. And that's simply because you're not going to get 100% sealing integrity on these Teflon sealing rings. All one-piece or two-piece Teflon sealing rings will leak a little bit on air checks on the bench, and then they seal up 100%. Once they're subjected to fluid and heat and all that stuff, they expand and they seal off that circuit completely, assuming they're in good shape. All right, so we're at 0. Let's see what we have. Okay. 42, 43, it's returning 1 thou below 0. So we're going to call that 43 thousandths. Alright, so 63 versus 72. We're going to go ahead and install our last 72 thousandths of an inch thick friction, and then we'll go ahead and measure. Now, normally I'd measure on two different opposite sides, but because we're so far out, there's no point in taking another measurement, at least as with the clutch stacked up the way it is. Alright, both 72 thousandths of an inch thick steel plates are in, along with the factory steel at the bottom at 115 or 116. We're at 0. Actually, we are 2 above 0. Let's re-0. This thing wants to jump around. So it looks like 33 to 34 thousandths. Alright, let's go ahead and make a mark, and then we'll measure at the opposite side. I'm going to start at 1 thou. Alright, so we're right at the upper end of the range. Right at the upper edge. So let me root around and see what I can find. Like I said, I want to be preferably below 30 thousandths with this clutch. That's my ideal place to be. Somewhere between 20 and 30 if I had to give a little bit broader of a range. So let me see what I can do in that regard, and then we'll come back. If I can, I mean, we're technically within spec, we're just on the outer edge of it, but I really don't like to be on the outer edge of spec. Alright, so here's what I've done. I've replaced one of the Raybestos frictions with a factory friction. Okay, the factory frictions are, I want to say 82 thousandths thick. So here's the Raybestos friction, it's 64 thou. And then here's a factory friction. And actually it looks like it's 79 thou, so 79 thousandths. And I want to see where I ended up. Now, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with running a factory friction in an otherwise, you know, Raybestos stack up. You're not going to have any kind of problems, you know, intermixing one friction of a different type. All right, they'll all adhere to the steel plates just the same. You know, they'll all react the same way to, you know, apply forces. So, you know, don't let anybody tell you that this is going to cause failures or problems or, you know, whatever. That's just not true. All right, let's see where we are at. Okay, it looks like we're 27 thousandths. And we're turning 1 thou below 0. So let's go ahead and spin it 180 out. Again, we want to be roughly 90 degrees offset from the ends of the snap rings. So snap rings right here. So we'll just kind of leave it right there. So I'm going to set 27 thou on the other side. And it's like we're returning below 0. Alright, we're going to call this 27 thousandths of an inch clearance. So, I'm happy with this. I have the factory friction right here on the top, and that is simply because, like I said, you know, if you're going to have a heat gradient kind of curve, if you will, in the drum, the hotter portion is going to be at the applied piston, or, you know, the closer you get to the piston and deeper into the drum, the hotter the temperatures will be. So I'm going to call this good, and so now we're ready to move on. Alright, now we'll go ahead and work on the direct drum. So we have our sealing rings, we'll put those on last. And then we have the clutch basket itself, snap ring, Belleville plate, apply piston, and balance piston. So here is our O-ring kit. So direct clutch is known as the B clutch for ZF, and the 3.5R clutch for GM. All right, so you're going to have 2 O-ring seals on the apply piston, and you're going to have 1 on the balance piston. There's no seal inboard. You know, like I said, these transmissions aren't all that difficult from, you know, assembly perspective. You know, you just, like any other transmission you work on, you just, you know, you want to be careful. So, and that applies to me as well, obviously. All right. I don't know why I'm making this more difficult than it needs to be. Okay, these bushings in this drum, they can be kind of a pain. Not so much from an installation perspective, but both of them had to be honed to fit, so to speak. So you have your forward hub and your bearing, and the forward and the direct mesh and mate like so. All right. So just carefully seat your piston. Ensure it's good to go. And then just heavily lube the inner diameter where the balance piston is going to go. And we'll prep our balance piston. Balance piston goes like so, and you can see the wear marks on, or excuse me, the Belleville plate goes like so, and you can see the wear marks on the balance piston. Alright, let's go to the press and install them. Alright, gonna introduce you to another special tool. Again, another OTC. This is gonna be 307552, and it just functions as a spacer that sits on top of the balance piston so that you're not pressing directly against the balance piston with whatever clutch spring compressor tool that you're using. All right. Alright, this is another relatively tough snap ring, so again you want to come with some authority. So I am not the greatest in the world when it comes to snap ring manipulation, so let's see if I can get this done in one attempt. Looks like I can. Alright. Alright, let's go back to the bench. Okay, so real quick, gonna change out these ceiling rings here. So they're scarf cut, meaning you don't need any kind of special sizing tool. All you're gonna do is just take the old ones off, pre-wind the new ones, and then put the new ones on. And that's it. So even I can't screw that up. So grab green assembly lube, or equivalently thick lube, whatever your preference is, and then just go ahead and wind these so that they grab the inner diameter of the ceiling ring groove nice and tight, and then just go ahead and install them. Looks like I stretched out a little too much, so we're gonna do it again because I can screw it up. Okay, that's what it should look like. Okay, ditto for ring number 2. And when you do pre-wind them, try to pre-wind them on the sides that interlock. So, in other words, don't pre-wind it like this, pre-wind it like this. Alright, seems I have not strategically placed a shop towel nearby so I can wipe my hands. So let me go wipe my hands and then we'll put the clutch pack in. Alright, so here's going to be our direct pack. The cushion plate is going to be 34 thousandths. And then we're going to have 5 frictions, 5 steels, and a top plate or backing plate. So the backing plate is 153 thousandths of an inch. That's 0.153 in the portion that makes contact with the snap ring. The snap ring itself is 132 thousandths of an inch. And then our frictions are going to be 85 thousandths. And steel plates going to be 80 thousandths or 81 thousandths. So these are high energy frictions. Same friction shared between the direct clutch and the intermediate clutch. The intermediate steels are thicker. They are the same thickness as those in the forward clutch. So the clearance range of this is fairly wide. 19 to 51 thousandths of an inch. I like to see between, let's just call it 24 to maybe 32 thou, 33. Somewhere in there would be nice. I don't like too much clearance in this pack. I don't want it to, be too tight, obviously. But this and the overdrive clutch are vulnerable to, a good extent. All right, I'm gonna put this aside for right now, and then we're going to come with the center support. So you have your bearing here, and then you're going to have an O-ring here. So the center support contains pistons for 2 clutches. Your intermediate clutch, which is in here, and then your low reverse clutch, which is all this stuff, and that sits back here like this. I was literally about to say overdrive clutch. So here's your C-clutch / intermediate clutch O-ring seals, Belleville plate, and you have your snap ring support or retainer, and then your apply piston. So this is a braking clutch. Okay, the intermediate clutch is what we refer to as a braking clutch, as is the low reverse. And then the other 3 clutches are what we call drive clutches. So think about how a transmission works. At a very high level, you have, parts that are broadly equivalent to those in the human body. So the human body has what? A brain, a heart, skeletal system, fibrous muscle tissue system, and connective tissue along with internal organs. Okay, a transmission in many ways is no different. Okay, the transmission has a brain. In more modern units like this one, it's an electromechanical brain. So you have your PCM, which controls the transmission, or in the case of the older units that had the onboard TECM, that was the electronic portion of the control, the control mechanism. And then your things like your lead frame or lead frame serve as additional command and control or sensory nodes, and then you have your valve body, which is your mechanical portion of that brain. So the whole control body complex, in combination with the PCM for newer units, is broadly speaking the equivalent of the brain and spinal column in a human body. So the brain tells everything else what to do, but in order to actually function, you need a heart, right? So you need a heart. That's the front pump, pumps blood throughout the body, or in the case of the transmission, moves fluid and generates pressure. Okay, you also have your torque converter, which I guess is broadly speaking analogous to I don't know. I mean, I guess there's really no equivalent to the human body, I guess, for the torque converter, but you have all your apply circuits as well as your lube circuitry. That's going to be the equivalent of your blood vessel system, so arteries, veins, capillaries, and such. Then you have your fibrous muscle tissue, which is going to be your clutch packs in a transmission, or in the case of older units that have bands, they'll have bands. Any applied elements, fibrous elements, will be the equivalent of fibrous muscle tissue. And then as far as your skeletal system, that's going to be all of your drums, your shafts, your gear sets, basically everything that physically bonds or unites the engine to the drivetrain that's part of the transmission. So ultimately your output shaft. The output shaft has to spin in various rates of rotation relative to the engine to give you different gear ratios. So when the human body decides, it wants to move, in other words, you want to get up and walk and go somewhere, okay, you're going to get up, you're going to walk, and your brain's going to send all kind of signals out to the rest of your, rest of the parts of your body to get your muscles moving, get your bones and everything else working. So in the case of the transmission, when vehicle's fired up, everything's good to go, neutral safety switch or range sensor confirms that everything is acceptable in terms of range position to allow you to even start the car, then at that point it's up to the driver to decide what he or she wants to do next. So assuming you put the thing in gear, a whole slew of commands are issued to work the forward clutch pack. So all those components that I just mentioned all then begin to work in harmony with each other to give you forward movement. So your fibrous muscle tissue, i.e. the forward clutch pack, begins to move. That transfers energy through to the planetaries as a driving element. Then ultimately that energy then serves to move the rest of the components in the case at a rate of rotation that is indicative of a first gear, which I think these are like something like 410 to 1. So that means that the engine is rotating 4.1 times, if that's the correct ratio. I'll annotate, I don't know offhand what it is, relative to the rate of rotation of the output shaft. meaning the engine is overdriving the output shaft is underdriving the engine. So all gears in this transmission 1 through 4 are defined as underdrive gears, meaning the output shaft is rotating slower than engine speed. Okay, that allows you to build torque and RPM to get moving. Then once you transition into 5th gear, you're going to have a 0.8 overdrive to 1, where the output shaft and everything else inside involved in that whole chain is moving at 1 revolution for every 0.8 revolutions of the rotating assembly of the engine. Hence, the output shaft is overdriving the engine, hence overdrive. So that's in a nutshell how a transmission works. And all these clutch packs will either act as driving clutch packs, meaning when they're applied they turn elements, or in the case of braking clutch packs, when they're applied they are designed to arrest elements and hold them in place to change that rate of rotation of the output shaft relative to the engine based on what gear the transmission is in at any given time. So I know that's a very hasty explanation of how one of these things work, but hopefully it makes sense. If not, I understand. I have a separate video on GM 6L80s. I think it's the part of the diagnostic and troubleshooting series, and that gets into all of the power flow theory and how a transmission works, and how to read things like applied charts and both applied element charts and solenoid charts and things like that. And so if you want to really get into the weeds, at least on my channel, that's the best video for that. And the 6L is the GM equivalent of this transmission, 6L80. Alright, I should probably focus some more on what I'm doing here. What I like to do with these is just simply very gently rotate them into position. They can be a little ornery, and if you're not, you don't want to force anything, obviously. So if it's not just working in for you, take it out, apply more lube. I tried to force the issue with that sealing ring on the turbine shaft that was getting hung up, and I ended up breaking the bottom sealing ring. So they sell sealing ring kits separately, and I just put a new one on. But still, it's like it serves as a lesson what happens if you are too hasty with what you're doing. And I'm a human being, and I occasionally succumb to that, and that's what happened there. Alright, there we go. Took a little bit longer than I was thinking it would take, but it's in there. So I'm gonna flip this over now. That's just the bearing. And replace this O-ring. This is going to be for low reverse. So here's our low reverse, or D-clutch. So a lot of changes to these units over the years. The big one, as far as case is concerned, is the introduction of the mechanical diode. Alright, that drove a whole slew of changes everywhere else in the transmission. So, pre-mechanical diode, low reverse was dually fed. You had your D1 and your D2 apply circuits. So you had two separate feed ports in the case. Valve body was different. But once the low diode was introduced, they changed the geography of the apply circuit for low reverse, and now it works in combination with the low diode for reverse and for drive, so that you don't need to dual feed the low reverse clutch pack. Alright, so this piston changed. I mean, this whole contraption here for the apply piston is different for that pre-mechanical diode version of these transmissions. I should have mentioned this earlier too, but I guess I'll mention it now. Not all 6R80s are the same when it comes to clutch pack count. Clutch pack count. Yeah. Clutch pack count. So the number of frictions varies based on application, model, or submodel. So you just want to pay attention to how many frictions and steels each clutch pack has in your transmission, so that you just go back with the right amount. And always keep your old frictions and steels handy for reference, especially if you're going to be using non-factory friction and or steel modules, because you never know. I'm not saying it's always a problem. Usually it's not, but every once in a while you'll have a situation where, you know, something will be way out of whack clearance wise, and you want to try to figure out what that is. So make sure the notch is lined up with the notch on the stator here. I think that'd be common sense, but I managed to screw that up. Alright, there we go. That was also a little sloppy. Let me just double check. Double check. Getting a little sloppy. It's real hot out here, and you know, I don't mean to make excuses, but at the same token, I can't deny the effect that is having on performance. You know, heat will fatigue you a lot faster than you might think, so always be hydrating. As soon as I'm done with this segment, I'm gonna get a big giant glass of ice water. Okay, this appears to be fine. It's just a little harsh going in, so that's why I wanted to double check it. Alright, guess that's just the way it is. Alright, it's off to the press, so we can install these return spring assemblies, and then we'll go ahead and stack up the intermediate. And then from there, we will measure clutch clearance on both of them, intermediate and direct. Alright, so you're going to situate your Belleville plate with the tongues facing up. And then your retainer is going to go with the beveled side facing down. And the snap ring is just going to go right here. So we're going to put our clutch spring compressor tool and kind of open it nearly as wide as it will permit me to do so. And we'll go ahead and compress it. Now what I gotta do is I gotta get it so that it's like already kind of in the groove in the back, and then expand it and bring it forward. And because of the way the ends are, it can be a little tricky to do that. So sometimes you got to do one side and then you do the other. All right, let's go back and actually I'm gonna grab the low reverse stuff and we'll put that on while we're here. So here's your low reverse Belleville. Situate it. You have a alignment tab or engagement tab. You want to situate that like so, and then what I'll do is I'll just want to make sure that the all points of contact for the locking tabs are engaged to the snap ring. Alright, on the way down you just want to really be sure that you're engaged and that that tab here is lined up with the cutout in the drum, otherwise you'll break the drum. Looks like we're not entirely seated. So we'll recompress and reseat. There we go. All right, now we go back to the bench. All right, so intermediate clutch, C clutch, or 2.6 clutch for Ford, ZF, and GM respectively. So we got a 34 thousandths cushion plate. And then each of the steels are, I believe, 117 thou thick. Yeah, 116, 117 thousandths. And like I said, these are the same clutches as what is used in the Direct. So we can expect to see 84, 85 thousandths on the clutch thickness. High energy, factory Borg Warner. Alright, the factory clutches in these are actually very robust. As far as individual friction material is concerned, individual clutch, they can reliably handle a lot of power. But both the Direct and the Overdrive are just simply vulnerable. This is the way it is, I guess. So our snap ring, I believe this is 132 thousandths of an inch thick. Or no, it's 124. I apologize. 124. Okay, that one's 132. Okay, I'm going to fire the compressor back up. We want to see 27 to 43 thousandths for clearance. And for this, I like 31 to 36, 37. That's like nice in the middle for this clutch. All right, we have everything set up. I don't have the dial indicator set up yet because I just want to work the clutch packs. So your intermediate clutch feed is going to be here on the center support. This is going to be your D1 feed for your low reverse. This is D2. Does not exist anymore, but does in the pre-mechanical diode transmissions, so 2009, 2010. And then this is going to be your direct clutch feed. So one thing I would encourage you to do with the direct clutch is actually check the clutch by itself first before you air check through the center support. So you have two feeds, one on either side of each other right here on the stator, here and here. So all you need to do is plug one of these holes with a finger and then press hard on your nozzle to fully seal the other one and then apply the clutch. Okay, you want to hear no air escaping from that clutch because you're going to hear air escaping through these Teflon scarf cut sealing rings. Teflon rings, especially scarf cut rings, will not air check to the tune of 100% sealing integrity. Okay, even the solid one-piece Teflon rings will leak a little bit. That's normal. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'll set up the indicator. I got to move the camera and some other components. They're in the way, but I'm going to use the bench top to situate the indicator so that we can do clearance checks on the intermediate and the direct clutch. All right, and then from there we'll move on down to the rear gear train components, discuss those, and then that'll basically be it for sub-assemblies. So like I said, I will go through the process of putting the entire overdrive / forward clutch and hubs assembly together when we go back to either I'll put it at the very end of this video for sub-assemblies, or I will put it at the start of part 2, which is case assembly and final assembly. So it'll be somewhere in there. I just have to throw another sealing ring on there on the turbine shaft. So anyway, give me a second. We'll set up the indicator and then we'll do clearance checks. All right, we got the dial indicator set up. So we're going to go ahead and measure the intermediate clutch clearance here, and then we'll go 180 out, measure it again there, and take an average like usual, and then we'll do the direct clutch. All right, you don't need a ton of air, just enough to, work the clutch, and that's basically it. So I'm using about 70 psi right now. All right, now one thing about this particular bench is that it's, not super stable, so the indicator will want to move around a bit. All right, so I'm putting tension on it. We're at 90,000, so that's going to be our 0. Alright, now it's going back to 0. Okay, 40 thousandths over there. So what I need to do, because of where the ports are, I actually need to physically move the indicator. I can't just, you know, spin the clutch itself around. So let's see how I'm going to do this so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. Alright, I'm going to have to like move the camera just a little bit so you can have a better view of that indicator. Alright, hopefully the glare isn't too bad. You know, if you can't see the indicator, I'll just call it out. And it's kind of awkward, but... $40 thousandths. Starting at 1 thou under 0, 39 thousandths, returning to 1 thou under 0, 39, and I moved it a little bit. So 39 to 40 thousandths. So for intermediate clearance, you want to be 43 thou on the high end, and your low end's like 28 thousandths or 27 thousandths. 27 thousandths. 27 to 43 thousandths. We're at 40. We have a 124 thousandths thick snap ring. Let's see what else we have. So we got 144, 138. 138 is going to be too tight. And I think we got 130. Sorry for the reach across. Alright, let's see if it'll capture that. But this is 130 thousandths, so I'm going to throw this in and see what we get. And to be clear, there's not always a perfect linear relationship between the difference in the thickness of snap rings and the amount of travel you end up with. Okay, so just because I put a snap ring here that's 6 thousandths of an inch thicker, it doesn't automatically mean that I'm going to have 6 thousandths of an inch less clearance. So that's why you always want to measure. Alright, that thing's full of glare. Let me actually just reposition everything. And then I'm going to move the camera. Alright, that should be a little better. Starting out at 0. About 70 psi. And 32 thou. Not quite returning to 0. And not quite returning to 0. $32 thou. and all the air you're hearing is out of the nozzle. So 32 thousandths, I like that a lot better. Gives me a lot more wiggle room if, you know, there's some growth in terms of clearance when it goes back in versus what we had for the 124 snap ring. All right. To what extent you're going to see this, I do not know. In fact, it's at an angle where I can't even see it. All right, I have to be able to get at the port. It's like 32, maybe 31. Starting at 1 thou. 32 back to just below 1 thou. 32 back to 1 thou, so 31 thousandths. So 27 to 43, this will probably grow by 2 or 3 thou. That should be fine. And that's what we're going to roll with there. All right, let me go ahead and spline in the direct clutch. All right, we won't need this platform base anymore. Make sure that that bearing that sits on the front of the center support for the direct drum is there when you do this. Alright, so we got our snap ring end here, so we want that 90 degrees offset. And I want to make sure that this thing is straight up and down like it should be. Alright, the port for direct is over here. I'm going to make sure you can see the indicator itself. (19 to 51 thou). So we're returning back to 2 thousandths. Going to 32, so far 30 thousandths appears to be clearance. 32 thou, back to 0, 32 thousandths. 32 thou, back to 0. (32 thou) back to 0. All right, 180 out. At 0. 32. Pour sealing. 33. 1 under 0. 1 below. All right, we're at 0. 33 thousandths back to 0. 33 thousandths back to 1 under 0. So it's either going to be 33 or 34 thousandths. 32, you know, add the two together, divide by 2, it's 33 on average. So here are all the clearances, as well as all the different selective snap rings that are available, or at least a good, you know, good proportion of them. So forward, you want to be 2843, intermediate 2743, direct 19 to 51, overdrive 19 to 35, low reverse 39 to 62 thousandths. So far so good with all of our measurements. So again, and sorry for reaching into the space there. All right, sub-assemblies are largely done. So here are all the remaining snap rings. Fortunately, I had no concerns or problems with the overdrive clutch. I mean, that's kind of right where you want to be in terms of clearance for that thing. But if the customer goes with like the Raybestos Performance Pack, then everything will come out of that clutch, and it'll all be replaced by Raybestos steels and frictions, snap rings, and I think they have a couple different thicknesses of snap ring, or excuse me, snap ring and steel plate, so you can dial things in. All right, Ford OEM diode. So when you're holding in this direction, it spins counterclockwise, locks clockwise. All right, I believe you can buy internal parts and components for these if you need to overhaul them. Low reverse clutch. So 40 thou on the cushion plate. And the steel plates are, I believe, 70 thousandths of an inch. Maybe they're 67 thousandths. The flat steels. And the frictions are the same as forward frictions. 62 thousandths or 61 thousandths. And they go into the case like this. So this is going to be facing up or facing you when the clutch pack is installed, and then you'll notice that there is a kind of a rough side or machine side of the plate, and then there is a smooth side. It's this smooth side that faces the friction. All right, so you have your ring gear basket. So it's this little bushing in here that was a god-awful pain. And it's the intermediate shaft's pilot that lives in that pocket. So that's your output ring gear assembly. Planet. You're gonna have a rear bearing that goes like this. And I still have to soak this thing in Mercon LV, but we'll cover the orientation of sun gears and bearings there as well. So this is going to be your rear sun gear. Okay, this is a compound Ravigneaux style planetary carrier. So multiple gear ratios are possible with this design. And it has two entirely separate planetary sets and two independent sun gears. So the side with the larger gap between the face and the splines faces down. And then your Torrington bearing going to go like this with the pocket, or I'm sorry, the locator radius inboard like that. And then that will sit at the base like this. All right. Then this bearing is going to be like this. Okay, this side faces inboard. A bearing goes like this. And then your front sun gear goes like that. And this lives there. So splines on the direct clutch stator merge or mesh with the splines on that top sun gear. So if you wanted to leave it like this and install the planet fully assembled, you can do that. If you want to install the planet and then install the sun gears, just because of weight considerations, you can do that. The GM planets have a different design. They don't look like the Ford and the ZF planets do. Okay, this triangular cutout does not exist in those. In fact, see if I can get under here and show you instead of just trying to tell you. Let me move the camera because it's in my way. So here is the GM equivalent. So Ford on the right, GM on the left. So in GM's case, you have a captured needle bearing assembly. Okay, and this one's kind of partially coming out. That's not supposed to be like that, but anyway, you take this out with a special tool, and then you have your forward and your rearward sun gears with bearings in the middle and on the bottom. And notice the difference here versus here. Okay, a completely different design other than at the highest level. Okay, they're both Ravigneaux style carriers, but GM took a completely different route when it came to the physical architecture of this planetary than Ford and ZF. And that's basically a recurring theme throughout the entirety of the 6L family compared to the 6R and ZF 6-speed automatic transmission family. So here's the back. I'm not going to release my hand simply because I don't want some gears falling out all over the place, but this is what it looks like. You have your base plates, completely different design as well. Okay. All right, so you're probably wondering, well, which one is better? In my opinion, you know, I don't think there is a quote-unquote better design. I think it's just two different approaches to solve the same problem or meet the same need. So this one is a little heavier, so when you install it, unless you're going to install this seal after you've put the whole planet into the case, you know, seal and bearing assembly, then this is going to be easier to work with. All right, we're done with sub-assemblies.